Hi guys, welcome to my October reading wrap up. It is a rainy day here today, so I'm sorry if it's a little loud. I'm going to try to talk over it, but I'm excited to share the 12 books that I read in October. 12 is a record for me in terms of the number of books read in a month, so I am excited about that. But while the quantity of books was great, the quality was just kind of average. I gave out a lot of 3-star ratings, and I read mostly thrillers in October for spooky season, so I'm feeling a little burnt out on thrillers at the minute. But let's go ahead and get into talking about all the books that I read last month. The first book I read, I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. So I have seen The Mother-in-Law when I'm just looking at other thrillers kind of in passing, but I have never heard anyone talk about this book before, and I thought the synopsis sounded pretty interesting. It's about a young woman and her troubled relationship with her mother-in-law, and it ends in murder. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna give it a listen. If I don't like it, I'll cut it off. And right away I was captivated because it's an Australian book, so it's narrated by an Australian narrator, and I thought the audiobook was so well done. And this book honestly blew me away. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, but I had a really good time listening to it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. This book, like I said, on the surface, it seems like it's just gonna be about a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law and their troubled relationship, but it is really so much more than that. There are all these different aspects to the family dynamic that are kind of putting pressure on the family. We see other members of the family and how they affect the relationship between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. This book reminded me a lot of one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read, which is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson, because we'll get dual timelines in the past and present, and we also get dual POVs from the mother-in-law's point of view and the daughter-in-law's perspective. And it was so interesting. There wasn't one POV that I enjoyed more than the other, and I enjoyed both the past and the present stories equally as much, which I feel like usually in books you either like one or the other better and you're rushing through one set of chapters to get to your favorite part. But in this book, I enjoyed all of it equally. And I really loved how the storyline in the past would come up in the present, and you saw like how that thing that had happened in the past was playing out in present day, and it was just so well done. And I was not expecting to like this one as much as I did, but I thought it was really good, and I really like the audiobook, so I recommend listening to it. And I definitely think I'm gonna try another book from this author because it was just so good. Then I reread Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I'm not going to go into detail about what this book is about because I feel like everyone knows, but I highly recommend picking up this series this fall and into winter if you haven't read it before, or if you just haven't read it in a while. I was due for a reread, so that's what I wanted to do. This whole series I would give 6 stars. It's amazing, it's incredible, got me into reading as I feel it got a lot of other people into reading. And yeah, just wanted to read it for fall because it is really great fall vibes, and I'm planning on rewatching the movies as well. Then the only romance that I read this month was Accidentally Amy by Lynn Painter. I'm so sad to say that this is the second book this year that I have given 1 star to. I don't want to say too many bad things about it because I feel like I am going to really enjoy Lynn Painter's other books, but it's my understanding that this book started out as a chapter she sent in her newsletter to her readers, and readers were so obsessed with the premise of it that they wanted a whole book out of it, so that's what she did. And I get why, because the premise sounds so interesting. It's about a woman who is starting a new job, but it's also the same day that pumpkin spice lattes are back at Starbucks. So she's running a little late, but she needs her coffee. She needs pumpkin spice on the first day. So she goes to Starbucks. She's waiting for her name to be called out for her latte. And the barista calls out pumpkin spice latte for Amy, and she calls it out 3 times. Amy doesn't show up, so this woman is like, you know what? I'm just gonna grab her coffee. She got the same thing as me. She can get mine when my name is called. I'm gonna be late for my first day of work, but I need my coffee. So she takes Amy's latte. She ends up running into this guy in Starbucks, bumping into him. She spills her pumpkin spice latte all over him, and he sees her name is Amy, and they have like a little meet cute. And then when she goes to work later, she finds out that he is like one of her bosses in the company, and he's like, I thought your name was Amy. And then he's disappointed that she like lied about her name and stole someone else's coffee. So the premise sounded super cute, and I thought it was gonna be so perfect for fall. And after the first few chapters, it became clear to me that this was just like thrown together really quickly to get it out for fall for her readers. And it's marketed as Meet Cute plus Grumpy Sunshine plus Friends to Lovers. And it was just way too insta-lovey for me. They say that they become friends, but like they have literally 3 interactions and they're like, oh, we're friends, and now it's Friends to Lovers. And it was just weird. It was not well developed at all. There were typos and spelling errors and all kinds of grammatical issues in this book, which I didn't realize it was because she self-published it and this was like the first draft of this or whatever. So after knowing those things, I'm not gonna judge this too harshly, but yeah, didn't enjoy it, sadly. Then I listened to another thriller on audiobook. I listened to The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. I've seen a lot of people reading her new release, which is called The Housemaid, I think. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was enjoyable, but a little bit forgettable. Basically, it's about this woman who is a surgeon, and when she was younger, her father was a serial killer who got caught. So now she's like changed her whole identity, trying to leave all that behind. She doesn't want anyone to know that her dad was this serial killer. And now in present day, someone is killing her patients, and they're murdering her patients the same exact way that her father did his killings. So she's like, oh my god, someone knows my father's identity, someone knows that I'm his daughter, and someone is copycatting his murders. This book kept my interest the whole time, and like I said, it was enjoyable, but it wasn't anything super memorable or a new favorite or anything. It could only end like one of a few ways because there weren't too many characters. So I wasn't super surprised by the ending. It wasn't shocking, but it was a little twisty and I did enjoy it overall. I also wasn't a huge fan of the audiobook narrator, so I wouldn't really recommend listening to it that way. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I read it physically, but I'll probably pick up The Housemaid at some point by Frida McFadden because I've heard good things about that one. Then the next 3 books I read for a Dark Academia reading vlog. I will link that above and below for you to watch if you want to hear more of my thoughts on any of these books. So the first book I read for that vlog is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one is the original Dark Academia book, and I totally see why it birthed the whole subgenre and why it gets all the hype and the praise that it does. Basically, we're following a pretentious group of friends and there is a murder in the friend group. We see the events leading up to the murder as well as the aftermath. And I thought these characters were some of the most interesting and intriguing I have ever read about, and I'm never going to forget these characters. They left such an impression on me. Even though they were horrible people, I loved reading about them. But for me, this book was a little bit too slow and very detail heavy and wordy, and it's more about the journey than what the journey leads up to. So for me, I just needed more of a climactic ending, but I did enjoy it overall. I gave it 4 stars. Then in that vlog, I read They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This one's following a woman who is a professor at a university, and she's also a serial killer who murders men who have done wrong to women. I gave this one 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was fast-paced, it was interesting, but it didn't keep me as on the edge of my seat as I was hoping. I felt like it could have been a little more tense and a lot more suspenseful for a thriller, and it was just a little bit flat and it lacked a little bit in depth, but overall, I did really enjoy this one. It had a few twists that I was not expecting at all, and I really loved the revenge, feminist vibes of this book. Then I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This one's following a psychotherapist named Mariana. She gets a call from her niece Zoe, who is a student at Cambridge University, and one of Zoe's friends has been murdered, and then there's also a serial killer who's murdering other young women on campus at Cambridge. So Mariana goes to comfort her niece and do some sleuthing of her own to try and uncover who is this serial killer on campus, and she suspects it's this professor who has this group of students called the Maidens, which is really creepy. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I really enjoy Alex Michaelides' writing. It's very well written and smart. It's really dark and moody and mysterious, but I felt like it was a little monotone and a little bit slow, and the ending just didn't do it for me. I was really disappointed in how things played out, and there were some characters in here who I felt like were only in there for the sole purpose of being a red herring, and their storyline just abruptly stopped, and there was a bunch of loose ends that never played into anything else, and I was just left disappointed. Then I listened to Good Girl Bad Blood on audiobook, which is the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. I wanted to give this series another shot because everyone seems to love it. I just thought it was okay. I gave the first book like 3 or 3.5 stars, and I gave book 2 3 to 3.5 stars also. I don't hate it, but it's just not for me. I think the teen detective trope is just not really my thing, but I do think the audiobook is really well done. After the events of book 1, Pip kind of swears off the whole teen detective thing, and she doesn't want to get involved because of all the trouble it brought to her and her family and friends. But then one of her friends comes to her saying that his brother is missing and the police aren't doing much to help him. So she decides to ramp up her teen detective antics again and start a whole podcast and interview people to try and help find her friend's brother. I think book 2 was a little bit easier for me to follow because I was used to the style of book 1 and all the characters, and I was ready for it, but I wasn't as intrigued by the mystery in book 2. I also feel like there's a lot of things that happen in these books where I have to suspend my disbelief, and it kind of feels like Pip is really doing the most. I'll probably listen to book 3 or read it physically because I've heard that that book in the series is a little bit darker, so I'm just interested and want to just finish it out. But I think it is really well written and well done. Then I read The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This one is perfect to read this time of year. It's basically like Halloween Town with a spicy romance in it. I started this book last year on Halloween Day, made it to chapter 11, and once Halloween was over, I was like, no, I need to save this for next year because the Halloween vibes are just perfect, and I don't want to read it any other time but prior to Halloween and on Halloween, so that's what I did this year. I timed it out a little bit better. In The Ex-Hex, we follow a witch named Vivi who ends up cursing her ex-boyfriend Reese after a bad breakup, but she doesn't seriously try to curse him. She's just kind of like saying a bunch of stuff when she's angry and drunk. But 9 years later, Reese comes back to the town where Vivi lives for their like Founders Day celebration, and they end up finding out together that the curse is real, so they have to work together to reverse the curse, and then it's about their romance. Reese in the book is Welsh, so the whole time I was picturing Taron Egerton as Reese, which made it so much better. If they ever made a movie of this book, I would love to see Taron Egerton play Reese. I think that would be so perfect. The last 3 books I read in October were for a thriller reading vlog that I filmed. I still have not edited that one, so it'll probably go up after my wrap up. So I'm not going to give too many of my thoughts on these last 3 books, but stay tuned for that reading vlog if you want to hear more things about any of these books. The first one I listened to on audiobook for that vlog is 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. Peter Swanson is one of my favorite thriller authors ever, and this book ended up being more of a mystery than a thriller, which I wasn't expecting, but I thought it was pretty solid. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This one's following a guy named Malcolm who used to work in this bookstore, and his job in the bookstore was to run the bookstore's social media. So he wrote this blog post one day about what he believes to be the best 8 murders ever written about in thrillers and crime books. And now in present day, someone is copycatting these murders. So now he's working with the police to help uncover who could have done these crimes, since he knows these crimes and these books better than anyone, and he wrote the blog post. I thought it was really interesting. There were a few twists and turns that I wasn't expecting in true Peter Swanson fashion, but this wasn't one of my favorites of his. Like I said, it ended up being more of a mystery, and I was hoping for more thrills. But overall, it was really well written and really well done. Then for that thriller vlog, I read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This, besides my Harry Potter reread, was by far my favorite book that I read in October. I'm still deciding between 4.5 and 5 stars, but this is one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read. It's my favorite Riley Sager book that I've ever read, and just one of my favorite books of the year in general so far. I thought this was so good. If you love Haunting of Hill House, this was a really great one. I love a good haunted house story. I read this one when I was home alone, and I was seriously spooked by it. Basically, we follow a young woman whose father passed away, and her father was most well known for writing this book about the house they grew up in, which was supposedly haunted. So after he passes, he leaves the house to his daughter. So now she's going to explore the house and try and uncover whether or not the things that her dad wrote in his book were fact or fiction. And this book was so fun. We got the chapters of the dad's actual book he wrote as like our past timeline, and then our main character Maggie's story in present day while she's in the house. And it was just so interesting to read about. I was so on the edge of my seat trying to uncover whether or not this house was haunted, and I just really loved it. Then the last book I read for that vlog and of the month was Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I read this one physically along with listening to the audiobook of it, and I definitely enjoyed reading it myself more than listening to the audiobook. Hi guys, sorry, when I was filming I forgot to give a synopsis of Daisy Darker, so just briefly, we're following the Darker family. They're all gathered at their grandmother's house, who they call Nana. There was this fortune teller who told Nana that she was gonna die on her 80th birthday. So now they're at Nana's house on her 80th birthday to both celebrate and also hear the reading of her will. The whole Darker family is pretty disappointed because Nana's not leaving much to any members of the family. And then over the course of this one night, all the family members are getting murdered one by one. So it's really just a whodunit, trying to figure out who the murderer is. Overall, I feel like this book was very slow and a little bit boring, but I do think the ending made up for it, and it was really well done. And the writing was just incredible. Alice Feeney is so smart, and I love how her books end because they're the kind of endings where you go back and want to reread the whole thing over because you're like, how did I miss this? I feel like she's just such a talented writer, and I want to read everything from her. Alright guys, that is going to conclude this reading wrap up. Those were all the books I read in the month of October. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if you plan to. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys!